Everyone knows Israel for the Holy Land, but there are other attractions.
Oh yes, there's so much more to Israel than just the Holy Land. Really, it's a small country, but a world in itself. Landscape is very diverse, many different cultures. The whole place is a melting pot, really, of people from all over the world. People come here for our wonderful cuisine and our very, very rich history.
So why the Crusades? Fundamentally, the Crusades were all about Christians from Europe gaining control from the Muslims of Jerusalem and the Holy Land, which today is situated within Israel. And we are here to uncover and discover the Crusaders' legacy in what is rapidly becoming a major tourist destination, where the Middle East meets the Eastern Mediterranean.
We have so many airlines flying in from all over the world. Okay, direct flights we have from North America, from Europe. Another thing is Israel is a very small country. I don't know, maybe you've noticed you can literally travel for an hour and a half from east to west, and even if you go from the furthest tip south on the Egyptian border up to the Lebanese border, it maybe takes 6-7 hours. Okay, so places are within a short drive away.
As Paul says, Israel is indeed a small country, and a modern road network links most of its attractions, making access to them easy. Our first port of call was Tel Aviv, situated along a pleasant stretch of the Mediterranean coast. This is Israel's second most populated city, and a major centre for business, the arts and tourism. Tel Aviv, which in Hebrew means Hill of Spring, combines the jewel of the ancient world, the port of Jaffa, with districts of modern late 20th century and early 21st century architecture. That first night in Israel, we walked through parks littered with sculptures, along paths with sea and harbour views, excited with the anticipation of our first taste of the local cuisine.
Israel, of course, is a modern country. We're only 70 years old. And so we have all the entertainment and the culture and the nightlife. If you take Tel Aviv, for instance, people call Tel Aviv the non-stop city. It's literally open 24 hours a day.
Our walk took us to Tel Aviv port for fabulous gastronomy with a sea view. Here in the designer setting we enjoyed great seafood, meat and vegetarian dishes, reflecting Mediterranean, Middle Eastern and Israeli cuisines. This was accompanied by delicious homemade bread and some local craft beers. In Tel Aviv we stayed at a beautiful boutique hotel with bright, nautically themed rooms, many with sea views, serving a delicious complimentary high tea each evening and in the morning a great breakfast. Next day we started our search for the Crusaders. But why did they come here and who were they?
People are aware, of course, that the Romans were here, but perhaps they're less aware of the Crusaders who came here a few hundred years after the Romans.
Oh, many years after the Romans. After the Romans, we had the Byzantines, we had the early Arabs, and then, yes, we had the Crusades.
Many with some knowledge of the Crusades will think of knights who were warriors, who built formidable castles. And later we should be seeing some fine examples of the castles they built, by the sea and on the top of mountains. However, even the toughest soldiers need to eat, and so the Crusaders were also farmers. On the road to Jerusalem, at Ein Hemed National Park, are the incredibly well-preserved ruins of the Crusader Aquabella farmhouse, dating from the 11th century.
Many people are probably unaware of just how many Crusades there were. I mean, the duration of them. I mean, the first one, I believe, was about the end of the 10th century, is that correct?
Yes, that's right. It all started when Pope Urban II gave a speech in the French city of Clermont, calling out to the masses to come out and rescue the holy city of Jerusalem and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre from the hands of the infidels.
A lot of the ones the ruins that survive, which would be your favourite, you would say, which are the ones you have to see?
Oh, AKKO, Accra, is a must.
Hi, welcome to Accra, on the Israeli coast, further north of Tel Aviv and Haifa. Here also, Crusaders are in evidence, particularly the Knights Templar
a night hospitaller.
Pilgrims always wanted to come to Jerusalem because this is the holiest site for the Christians. However, under Muslim rule, it was a very long and perilous journey. A group of monks decided to set up a small hospital to look after those people who actually were able to make it all the way to Jerusalem. And so came about the Order of St. John, and they were called the Hospitallers. After the capture of Jerusalem, most of the Crusaders went home. But the whole of Europe knew that, hey, we have Jerusalem. Many, many pilgrims wanted to go on a pilgrimage to the Holy City. And they came here, and there weren't enough people to look after them. The roads were still long and very, very perilous. So another order of knights was established, and this time they were called the Templars. So they were given a special dispensation from the Pope to be warrior monks. And a competition developed between those two orders. Who is building more forts? Who has more money? Who is more influential?
From the seafront of AKKO, where numerous restaurants and small hotels are situated, narrow old passages run through to a warren of streets filled with Arab market stalls. Modern-day AKKO is steeped in history since the times of the Crusaders, most notably the Ottomans, who built massive fortifications, and within these walls today there is a large Arab population. The jewel of the Crusader remains in AKKO is the Crusader citadel.
So where are we? You remember the Ottoman prison that was built? In the 1990s, they decided, let's go and see what's underneath. They removed the yard, which was right above our heads, and this is what they had discovered. So actually what we have now in AKKO is a two-layered city, where there was a Crusader street, we have a modern street. If you look over there, you see what the place used to look like. Now you could see that they didn't go the whole way. This is still left for future archaeologists to dig out.
Keep your head down low in these tunnels, or risk coming up against solid stone. People are a lot shorter in the time they were built.
Can you imagine how much money went into building this? They have a double tunnel here, and I mean, it's a fortune. So
This was discovered when?
1990s.
That's
Really recently, just because this lady had a clock tower.
So what became of these once powerful Knights Templar, who left so much we can appreciate today?
You name it, they're accused of it. And when you accuse people in the 14th century, what do? In order for them to admit their hideous crimes, you torture them. And what do you do under torture? You confess anything, right?
Yeah.
And what happened to all their money? Nobody knows.
Well, AKKO was certainly impressive and whetted our appetites as we continued our travels looking for more Crusader discoveries.
Right here in the middle of the fort, we have two geological plates who are going different directions.
On the road within Israel, the scenery changes rapidly, from seascapes to mountain scenery with inland seas. And behind each corner, there can be a surprise, including more evidence of the Crusaders' presence here. For a while, it seemed to be going so well for the Crusaders. That is until the Muslims found a new strong leader in Saladin.
Fortunately for the Crusades, the Muslims at that time were very, very divided. They didn't have a leader. By the time they had a leader, that was Saladin, and he set out he called on a jihad. A jihad is a holy war, and his jihad was to get the Crusaders, the Christians, away from the Holy Land, so that the whole area, the whole Middle East, would be only Muslim again.
The Crusaders not only built fortresses to control the Holy Land seaports, but also on the top of mountains, far inland near the River Jordan.
So here we are in another part of Israel, near the Sea of Galilee over there, and another Crusader castle, this time from the first crusade, built by the Crusaders, called Belvoir.
When we were in AKKO, we visited the headquarters of the Hospitallers. They were very, very powerful and very wealthy. So they decided to buy this fortified farm, and later on they built a huge fortress here. How huge? The biggest in the country. Saladin told his soldiers, okay, we're now separating 4 different ways, and you are riding as fast as you can to capture the jewel of the crown. They went to Jerusalem, they captured Jerusalem, and then he said, okay, now let's go around and handle those castles one by one. And all the castles were defeated. There were only 2 castles that were left. The one in Tyre and the one here in Belvoir. There were only 50 knights here and 400 soldiers. And they heard about the Battle of Hittim. They knew what was happening. And they stayed here in this very, very fortified castle for a year and a half.
What did they do, just leave one day? Or?
Yeah, Saladin allowed them to leave. He asked them, what do you want? And they said, well, actually, maybe we'll go home.
Looking back, Belvoir was probably my most favourite Crusader fortress, due to its isolated location and sheer scale and grandeur. Returning to the Mediterranean Sea, we were next to experience the Crusader castle at Apollonia.
Here we are at Apollonia in Israel, on the beautiful coast here, the Mediterranean coast. Over there is a castle built by the Crusaders in the 12th century, and it's on this spot here took place a battle between Richard the Lionheart, who we all know, and Saladin, the leader of the Muslims. And here Saladin suffered his worst defeat.
Apollonia has a complex history. A Crusader, perhaps the most successful, Baldwin I, took control here in 1102 after a siege by land and sea, and he allowed the inhabitants to leave. In 1187, Apollonia was recaptured by the Muslims, but fell again to the Crusaders in 1191 after a battle between King Richard I of England and the Muslim Saladin.
When the news of the fall of the Kingdom of Jerusalem arrived in Europe, everybody was horrified. And they set out on what we call the Third Crusader, headed up by Richard Lionheart. Richard never recaptured Jerusalem from Saladin. He remained under Muslim control, but he got permission from Saladin in the Jaffa Agreement for Christians to go and worship in Jerusalem. And he came here, also the big battle between Richard and Saladin, right here. Because the Crusaders were always a minority here in Israel, or the Holy Land as they called it, they had to fortify themselves. So they built little forts, and bigger ones, and some really, really large ones. Unfortunately, a Mameluke guy called Baibars, who was the one to finally expel the Crusaders from the Holy Land. 1265, Baibars come here with his army, lays siege to a castle. The battle lasts for 40 days. Eventually, they see that they have no way of holding on to this fort. So they go to Baibars and say, we are willing to surrender if you promise us our lives. Baibars says, okay, no problem. And he seizes the castle, after which he makes the knights burn it down, tear it down, and then he takes them all prisoners. He wanted to make sure that they don't return, so he went from one castle to the other and just destroyed everything he could see.
A short distance along the Mediterranean coast lies another treasure of the ancient world, Caesarea, where amongst a wealth of Roman and Byzantine ruins are some significant Crusader relics.
Nobody comes to Israel without hearing about King Herod. He took 12 years building this city, and he said, I'm going to build a beautiful Roman city that has everything that a Roman city needs to have. A theater, a temple, sometimes a horse race, baths, Roman baths. These are the things that Herod had built. When he had completed building this beautiful city, he named it Caesarea after August Caesar, who had just come to power.
In 1101, the Crusader Frankish army under King Baldwin I conquered Caesarea, and Caesarea became the seat of an archbishop, and Franks, Eastern Christians and Muslims settled here. Later, the Genovese found a green-coloured glass vessel in the city and declared it to be the Holy Grail, the goblet used by Jesus at the Last Supper. However, throughout this huge site, excavations continue, and almost daily, new treasures are unearthed.
And the inscription reads, Pontius Pilatus, the prefect of Judea, erected a building dedicated to the Emperor Tiberius. So this is a proof that a person by that name really existed. And the whole area was filled with this pottery. So they left this here for us to understand how it was covered and how it was really preserved.
So here we are, another Crusaders castle, here at Caesarea, which is a mixed site of Roman, Byzantine and other periods of ancient architecture. And this was built by a Crusader called St. Louis, one of the last of the Crusaders.
Caesarea National Park is massive in scale and a popular day out. Attractions are the Roman amphitheatre, still used for concerts today, and the archaeological park, where a wealth of pillars and sculptures are to be found, as well as the remains of a hippodrome. The old port area abounds with character, and here there are boutique shops and choices of places to eat, whilst taking in this most pleasant of settings. One can perhaps picture the Crusaders enjoying these same views all those centuries before, little realizing their presence here was soon to end at the hands of a certain Sultan Barbarous.
And what they did was they just scaled the walls.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they climbed into the moat, out of the moat, scaled the walls, and they circled the fortified gate, and they opened the town gate from the inside. At that time, the Crusaders all fled into the tower, and at that time, after a week, they offered to surrender to Barbarous. Destroyed all the walls, made sure there's nothing left, so the Crusaders will never return.
So as the sun sets, it's time to say farewell to Caesarea and get back on the road again, heading north along the coast in the direction of Haifa. Haifa is the third largest city in Israel and a major port, with a large mixed Jewish and Arab population. There are some most attractive areas of Haifa, a city dominated by Mount Carmel. In a broad, tree-lined avenue known as the German colony, fashionable restaurants with tables out onto the street abound, sitting alongside boutique hotels and shops. This leads to the immaculately landscaped terraces starting at the foot of Mount Carmel, of the Baha'i Gardens, leading to the shrine of Bab with golden dome. This is the most holy place for the Baha'i religion. By day and by night, the German colony is busy with people, some just out for a stroll, others seeking for a place to eat. We found a family-run Arab restaurant with a fantastic atmosphere, where we sampled some great food from the Arab and French traditions of cuisine. Homemade hummus and unique dishes like kubek, deep-fried torpedoes of minced beef with pine nuts and exotic spices. They have wonderful seafood, calamari, and thick juicy steaks, all followed by a choice of sumptuous desserts. Bringing us back to the hotel, situated in a beautifully restored building dating back to the time of the German colony. With 40 rooms with high ceilings and designer bathrooms, and antique-themed furniture throughout, this hotel took one back to another time when travellers had more time to indulge themselves.
So here in Israel, you're not going to get modern high-tech hotels, but you get old ones from the past which reflect times gone by and grandeur. Here we have a lovely room with lovely decor and a bathroom with a jacuzzi. Perfect.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our visit to Israel so far and have wondered as we have at the diversity of this country and gained a flavour of what this destination has to offer. Look out for our next programme, in which we visit a kibbutz on the Sea of Galilee and visit one of the most famous cities on earth, Jerusalem. Looking forward to seeing you next time.